Whoa, a new leak just dropped and it contains all of this year's updates and their capes. However, this clearly isn't real, it's just a picture taken from the previous template with their own fantasies applied on top. That makes this a copycat leak, and as awesome as the Soaring Skies update would be, it's not something we're going to see, but there is still good news for Bedrock players because 1.20 1.60 looks to be officially finished. This is not the update containing new pigs and wildflowers, that's coming in the spring of this year for Bedrock and Java, but instead 1.20 1.60 is a Bedrock only update that does a lot, and today I want to show you the 5 biggest features as well as when it's coming out and how we know that. But first things first, do consider subscribing if you want to stay up to date with the latest Minecraft news. A lot of channels do not cover the Bedrock edition, but that's precisely what we're going to do here, starting with how we know this update is finished and how it's not coming to Java. So the Java edition of the game can release updates whenever they want to, which is a strength because they can roll out features the same day they program them, and they can roll out as many updates on that day as they want to. The Bedrock version, on the other hand, is a little handicapped by being on so many platforms, many of which have review periods, which means the minimum period to get features that aren't an emergency out to the public is about 2 weeks. It's a little bit longer in most cases, but 2 weeks is the lead time between developing features and getting them out. And so rather than having to develop a big bundle of features and getting them out on a random basis, the Bedrock edition instead just deploys a guaranteed Minecraft update on a near monthly basis. It's about 8 times a year that they'll release an update to the game, and if it lines up with a major update to Java, they'll release it and you get new content, but otherwise they'll still release every single thing that has been worked on, whether that's one bug fix or 100, or indeed one minor feature or several dozen, as we know we'll be getting for Minecraft Bedrock one of these guaranteed updates with quite a few new to Bedrock changes in there. So the Java edition could release its own update alongside this, it's just we don't believe they have any plans to do so, and when you see what the features are, you might understand why, but it's also worth mentioning how is it that we know that this update is finished, and technically the answer is we don't. Minecraft could release another 1.20 1.60 preview next week, however we expect they actually won't, and they'll be immediately moving on to 1.20 1.70, and we expect that for 2 reasons. The first is that the last time they released an update was December 3rd, that will be at least 2 months before this update releases, so again, if they're trying to do 8 of these a year and trying to do almost every single month, then that means they need to release this as soon as possible. But the other sign is that the preview we got last week didn't even add all of the features, like we mentioned in the intro, there are no wildflowers found yet, because instead of focusing on adding new things for the spring drop, they're focusing on stabilizing this release so it can come out as soon as possible, and so all you'll find inside the newest Bedrock beta and preview is that players no longer float above the bed while sleeping, and fixed a bug where incorrect text will be shown on the bed screen. In other words, they're just finalizing this update as they did for 1.20 1.50, where the last preview had bug fixes alone, 1.20 1.40 had just bug fixes for its last preview alone too, and 1.20 1.30 had just a reversion of a previous change. In other words, when they're finishing up one of these minor updates, they try not to add major new features that might break things. And so when you see a tiny preview, it either means they had nothing they were ready to release that week, which is very, very valid. That does happen sometimes, but it's also quite likely that they're at the end of a preview and beta cycle, and that's what I imagine has happened here, especially given the release timing. And so now comes the question of what is inside of 1.20 1.60, given that this is going to be a Bedrock only update, and given that we can probably expect it in the next few weeks, it's important to know what exactly is going to be inside of it, and I figured even though I will be doing the full reveal of all of the features when the update does come out, I think it'd be important to give you the big ones right now, so here are the top 5 features from 1.20 1.60 for Bedrock players. Okay, the biggest feature is one that I know any Java players in the audience are going to make fun of us for, because no, the pause button hasn't existed on Bedrock and still doesn't as of the current version. Here is me pausing the game, but the pause menu on Bedrock does not actually pause anything. As you saw from that chicken moving around, and as you'll see if I pause and you can see that pig, everything in Minecraft still runs while the game is paused, which means you can die, and in my Let's Play world, this has happened, I'm going to be honest, more times than I care to admit during the transition from Java to Bedrock. So the pause button will finally pause the game after 1.20 1.60, which is incredible, but do you know what else is incredible? Well, let's go back to that previous version. As you can see, this is 1.20 1.50 again, and here is what a village looks like right now. If we load up the same seed after 1.20 1.60 using the latest beta and preview, whoa, look at that, there's a big hole running down the middle. This is something that Bedrock used to have for a very long time, but it was removed in the Caves and Cliffs update, ravines still existed, but were only allowed to generate below the surface, but now they're allowed to generate right up into the surface, even when there's a village there, which leads to these very cool bridges, at least in my opinion. And so just these two features alone, a pause button that pauses the game, and a new set of surface ravines are really, really cool. And honestly, as a former console player, I think add a lot of life back to the game. But there's other changes, the biggest of which you probably know about if you've been following the channel, because the world generation is going to change in its entirety. Every single biome in Bedrock is going to get changes to make its surface decoration look more like Java. This means that if we compare our seed right here, before and after the update, you'll notice that quite a few things change. Notably, all of the grass is in a different location. You may or may not spot that. It's not always so logical. But also, you'll notice that flowers are different and located in different places, but also everything else that the game considers to be decoration, so trees and even these hay bales right here, will generate in slightly different places, and so everything is changing just in the sort of way that if you're not paying attention to, you might not notice. That's why I'd say that it's a slightly smaller feature than what we have over here. You know, it's still nice to have nonetheless, I would say, but you know what else is very nice to have? Pick block. So pick block is something we've had on Bedrock for a very long time. If you play a controller, like I do, you have to manually assign it in the control, so make sure at some point you go and do that. It's my biggest Minecraft hack. If you assign pick block to something, it makes your life so much easier, but it's not just for creative where you can use this. This is where most people see the immediate value in being able to look at a block and immediately grab it from nothing, but in survival, you can use pick block too, unless you're a mobile player, where as of 1.21.50, it was added for creative, but not in survival. In 1.21.60, it will become a survival feature, which means even when you're playing in survival, if I look, let's say I've got this block in my inventory, and my inventory is otherwise filled with dirt blocks because I'm working on a silly flattening the world project, then if I want to get my oak blocks out, I just have to use my pick block on this. This is something you can do for keyboard and mouse as well as control right now, but it will be coming to mobile, which statistically is most Bedrock players. So good news, mobile players, your UI will get better if and only if you go to the settings and enable it. It is something you still have to enable inside of the touch controls. There is a pick block button that you're going to need to turn on, just like how if you want to pause your game, there is a general option called enable game pause, which is enabled by default, but make sure you don't turn it off. There is no good reason to want to turn this off besides AFKing and wanting your farm to still run, I guess. But even in that case, you could just use the inventory as your pause function rather than the pause function as your pause function. Speaking of using things as my pause function, we have one last big set of features, and that is towards the Pale Garden. So 1.21.50 was the Pale Garden drop, the Creaking Awakens. I'm pretty sure that's what they called it. Anyway, so in that drop, they brought in a brand new biome, and a lot of people felt like it was too small, and so what are they doing to fix it? Well, allow me to show you by loading up the Pale Garden seed template. This is available in Minecraft. A lot of people aren't aware of it, but you can load up a Pale Garden anytime you want without knowing the Minecraft seed, and this is what it will look like in 1.21.50. Well, it actually looks exactly the same from here, but I'm sure if we go up, then we'll notice that, was that over there before? That feels like that's new. Okay, whoa, it literally is. Here is what the seed looked like in 1.21.50. As you can see, a huge amount of dark oak forest, roof forest if you want to go back to its old 1.7 name. But as you can see, there is just one biome of Pale Garden here, and then one big patch of not Pale Garden. But if we close Minecraft and go back to the preview, wow, so much more Pale Garden. And also, you'll be able to find mansions in these Pale Garden biomes. You might assume that this was part of the spring drop, but this is just a bug fix or change they made at the same time as releasing that spring drop, because at the same time as this update releasing, a lot of non-beta or preview players will be able to play around with these spring drop features. That's because when they release this update, anytime you're creating a brand new world, all you need to do is go to the toggles in advanced and turn, well, it's in experiments rather, turn on drop 1 2025, and you'll be able to test the 4 features that are on Bedrock right now. So that means if you want to play with new pigs, you can technically do it, but it will turn off achievements, so I wouldn't recommend doing it yet. But if you just want to test it on a new world and you can't access the beta and preview, you'll sort of get access to that a little early. How early, I hear you asking? Well, that's a great question I can answer right after I reveal the real best feature inside of 1.20, 1.60, because obviously I just went through the headline 5, and there's a lot of other smaller, less notable features, but amongst them is going to be the biggest change ever, because a lot of people are excited about the Switch 2 and what that means for Minecraft players on Nintendo devices, but you don't need to worry about upgrading because they are going to be improving the Switch experience for Minecraft players by up to, and I'm quoting this directly from the changelog, up to 4% CPU improvements. Ooh-wee! That means that if you play Minecraft on a render distance of 6, which is probably about all the Switch can handle, you'll get an extra 4 blocks of render distance, although you can't do part chunks, so you'll just get a 4% higher frame rate, which is exciting if you ask me, because it means that if you were playing at 30 FPS before, now you'll be able to play at... Oh, the maths isn't very good on that one, is it? 31 FPS, baby! You better believe this is the update for Switch players. It is your time to enjoy. And speaking of times, you might want to know when this update is actually coming out, and great question. So on this channel, we have a spreadsheet that's been running since 1.16.20, and it has every single minor update that has come out for Minecraft alongside the final preview and beta in it, and then the release of that update. This allows us to track the time between the final preview and beta and the release, and as you can see by scrolling through it very briefly, the shortest time it has taken is 1 week and 5 days for a minor update. That was 1.17.30, and the longest it has taken is 4 weeks and 4 days for 1.16.100. And obviously this is very, very notably high, with most of the other ones taking about 2 to 3 weeks. The reason it tends to be 2 weeks and 5 days or 1 week and 5 days is because the last previews and beta almost always release on a Wednesday and Thursday, and the update releases on a Tuesday. And so using that information, we can say that the soonest this update is going to be releasing, 1 week and 5 days from now, would be February the 4th. This is kind of optimistic though, and the more likely day that it will release is February the 11th. If there are any issues or they need to fix even more things, it could be as late as February the 18th, but we now know that this update with all of these fun new features is going to be coming out in that time period, and that's going to be very exciting. There's going to be a lot of new seeds which all of a sudden get exciting in that way, and you better believe I'm going to be keeping my eye on that. But also this is exciting because it means that 1.20, 1.70 is officially starting development. This is almost certainly going to be the spring drop for Bedrock, and will line up with 1.20, 1.5 or whatever they decide to call it on the Java edition. And what's interesting is because the Java edition can just release updates whenever, it's really hard to tell when an update's going to release there, besides usually on a Tuesday, but the Bedrock version has to telegraph what they're doing much further in advance, and so if they're starting 1.20, 1.70 next week, generally speaking, we know the preview cycle lasts between 5 and 8 weeks, and so we get our first indications at when that might be coming out. But more to talk about that later. For now, I just want to say a brief update is that I want to talk more about Bedrock in my videos. I think that I have made the mistake of covering Java snapshots from a kind of disinterested outside perspective, and I think that as a result, I end up not focusing as much on the Bedrock side of things, and that's something I'd like to change here on this channel. I do want to talk about Java snapshots, especially when they get features we know are coming to Bedrock, and that's very important still, but I also want to make sure that we put some of the Bedrock beta and preview into the spotlight, and so that's precisely what I intend to do more when we get simultaneous Bedrock betas and snapshot releases, because even though the snapshots come out earlier, I need to resist the urge to cover them first, because what happens on Bedrock is generally much more interesting to us, the Bedrock players. And speaking of Bedrock players, please do consider subscribing to this channel if that is you, and otherwise I'll see you in the next one, because I'm streaming probably right now actually. Goodbye.